Welcome everyone. Today we are talking about persuasive communication. We're going to focus in on this guy named Cicero. On the back end, there's a few additional miscellaneous items that are covered in the chapter dealing with things like cognitive dissonance. I actually do cognitive dissonance more in depth in another class. So below there's going to be a link to a longer explanation for that. So today this PowerPoint YouTube is going to be pretty quick, but you also, if you're in my class, you need to watch the additional cognitive dissonance explanation, and I'll post that link below. So you have two videos you need to watch today. We're going to start off with a discussion on Cicero. Cicero lived from 106 to 43 BC, so he's coming up to the year zero, right before, birth of Jesus and the new calendar starts. All right. Cicero was a Roman statesman, and he, with regard to his contribution to persuasive speaking, all right, he said, look, you have to have wisdom, you have to have knowledge, you have to have logic, right? You have to make a rational argument, but you also need eloquence. So this sort of builds on the Aristotelian model for argumentation. Aristotelian just means that it's rooted in Aristotle, right? So the Aristotelian model said, look, people are just rational, and if we can teach people how to be rational, we can teach people the scientific method. We can teach people we can teach people rhetoric with regard to sort of building slow logical arguments on top of each other. Aristotle said, two politicians will go at it and the best rational argument will win. Cicero comes around a couple hundred years later and says that's incomplete. All right, and you all know today in 2021 that it's incomplete. Cicero said it's not enough just to have the rational best argument, but you also have to have eloquence, the pathos, the emotional connection to the audience. And we see this with politicians, right? The politician with the best, most rational ideas doesn't always win. We ask questions to pollsters ask citizens questions like, which politician makes you feel warm? Who would you invite over to Thanksgiving dinner? Who would you want to have a beer with, right? These are emotionally connected questions. And if we're honest with ourselves, they're kind of ridiculous that we ask them and we answer them. Excuse me. And the reason is because the president is never going to come to my house to have a beer, right? I don't care if the president or my senator is warm, right? Because that's not what my concern is, right? It's like I have family members and friends who, come and comfort me when my life is hard, right? You want a politician who just looks at the numbers, is very, very wonky, and says this law will sort of create the best solution for a problem. If anything, it's like you would like your politicians to be like those sort of non-celebrity academics who lock themselves in a closet and they just crunch numbers and they go through data and they spit out a sheet or a paper and say, here are the correct answers, just go implement them, leave me alone. Like you almost want like a hermit, right, as some sort of politician. But Cicero realized that the masses don't respond to that, right? The masses, the citizens, they want their politicians to sort of be these sort of quasi-parental figures that make us feel warm and safe and sort of brought into the fold, these emotional connections. People like it, all right? There's plenty of evidence on, both sides in 2021 of Democrats and Republicans. Some feel very sort of, you feel an emotional connection to, other people you don't feel emotional connections to. But that's usually sort of who wins, presidencies and Senate races, unfortunately, right? The most rational people, the most logically based people don't always win. People also want to feel these emotional connections. Cicero understood that. So we even have a term for that, Ciceronian, right? If, sort of like if a person is acting Ciceronian, it means they are acting with eloquence. Neologisms, all right? All these means are like new words. So neo means new, right? Logo, right? Words or symbols. Cicero introduced new words into our vocabulary that we still use today, right? So humanitas, so the humanities, we've discussed. Evidentia, so evidence, quantitative, qualitative research, right? These are all ideas that are sort of in the humanities, in the academy, that come out of philosophy that Cicero created these words, right? He introduced these words to the lexicon, 2,000 years ago, and they still stand today. So there's this academic named John William McHale who was around late 1800s, early 1900s, so about 100 years ago for us. And he talks about Cicero's influence from 2,000 years ago. And Mikhail says, like, this is what's incredible about Cicero. It's like Cicero's unique and imperishable glory is that he created the language of the civilized world and used that language to create a style which 19 centuries have not replaced and in some respects have hardly altered. So what Mikhail is saying is Cicero created this language for academia, and we haven't really touched it. Like, it was so spot on with regard to how academics were going to sort of carry out conversations and debates, that there was no real need to touch it for, for him 19 centuries, for us 20 centuries now. Yeah, so Cicero is extremely important. You should know his name. You should know a little bit about him, because sort of the foundation for all of the, vocabulary and the ways that we sort of move through the humanities today, a lot of it is based on his contributions. Persuasive communication. If you're in a public speaking class, which this is not a public speaking class, but you've probably taken the public speaking class, or you will. Here's a big thing on persuasive communication that you need to recognize, right? What you're trying to do is you're trying to influence, you're trying to change beliefs, you're trying to change attitudes. So trying to influence could mean that the people who are your audience, they might already agree with you, but now you're trying to mobilize them to do something. They could disagree with you, so now you're outright trying to change their beliefs, right? Or you're trying to change their attitudes towards a certain subject. Maybe they're indifferent and you'd like them to be more concerned, all right? So you always start with ideas, and this should lead to change in behaviors with regard to the individuals that you are speaking to, all right? Here's the big thing about persuasive communication I try to stress when I teach the classes. If you want people to act in any way, shape, or form, you have to start small. And you have to also start small with yourself. So here's a book by Admiral McRaven. And he wrote this book a few years back called Make Your Bed, right? Little things that can change your life, right? And so he was an admiral in the United States Navy, and he sort of goes through all these sort of small little things that he does every day as part of a daily routine that sort of make huge changes in his life. Have made huge changes in his life. And the first thing, he talks about is just like when you wake up in the morning, make your bed, like, brush your teeth, comb your hair, make sure you're well put together, make sure that your house is in order before you sort of leave for the day. It's like after you make breakfast, it's like wash your dishes so you don't leave dirty dishes in the sink all day. All right. So these little things. Okay. So when my students give these big persuasive speeches, they might give something on like climate change or world hunger or the plight of shelter animals, right? And these are big items that are important that we should be addressing. The problem is that when you go to your audience and you use a big proclamation like "Save the world," it is immobilizing, or it is paralyzing. People can't move out of this idea because save the world. It becomes so big that it's like, well, I might as well just not do anything. Like, there's nothing I can contribute, so I'm just not going to contribute anything at all. So instead, you tell people to make little small changes, right? So this is this whole philosophical attitude of, if you want to change things globally, think locally. Like, just take care of your neighborhood. If you just take care of your neighborhood, like, that's enough for you to try to figure out. Like, you don't have to change national politics or world politics, right? It's like you can just take care of your neighborhood. You don't have to clean up all the oceans, but it's like you can have like a nice, make sure there's not any garbage in your yard, right? So these little things. So instead of going to someone and say, save the world, you say, look, like there's people in the world who are hungry. Like, next time you go grocery shopping, buy an extra bag of groceries, take it to a homeless shelter, right? There's a lot of animals that are in like, animal shelters. It's very sad, right? I'm a big fan of animals. You can't save all of them, but it's like maybe you can adopt a pet, or maybe you can take a bag of dog food to your shelter, next time you go grocery shopping, whatever it is, right? So small changes. You ask people for small changes. Eventually, hopefully, they get a grasp on how to make the small change, and then they're able to make bigger decisions more effectively. But the way, a way to think about it, it's a little bit cynical, but go with me here. It's when people tell me, about, let's say climate change, right? And they're like, we need to save the planet because the planet is, dirty and there's trash everywhere and we need to clean this up. And then, you go over to their house and it's like, your house is a pigsty. Your house is a mess. I don't want to take advice from you about how to clean the planet when you can't even like clean your bathroom. That's a little bit cynical, right? However, I think it sort of holds true in sort of a larger, metaphor. Um, yeah, like I want to take advice from people who I have seen have sort of implemented these small changes in their own life, right? And then if you sort of take care and you clean up, right, your own, you make your bed, you clean your bathroom, you clean your yard, then maybe you can be responsible for, the recycling program in your neighborhood on your block, right? Trash pickup in your neighborhood on your block, right? And then maybe you deal with the local park, right? And then maybe you deal with like citywide stuff or statewide stuff, right? And then maybe it's like, okay, now you can go to the federal government or like the UN and make these changes, all right? But there's nothing more, there's something very weird about people whose entire life is in disorder going out there and telling you that you have to make big changes, and I'm like, you can't even like keep your room clean. All right, okay. Another small change, right, with regard to like exercise. So a lot of students give exercise and fitness talks, right? When people say like, I'm going to get a super hot beach body for the summer, it's very hard to do that. All right, so instead start small. If it's like, look, if you have some fitness goals, some diet goals, it's like maybe just say I'm going to cut out bread and soda from my diet. All right. All right, I'm not going to be on the cover of like GQ next week, or some fitness magazine, but it's like I can make these small changes and lose 5 pounds, like slow and steady and consistent. Then after a while, it's like I cut out bread and soda. Okay, cool. I got in a habit of that. And it's like, okay, now maybe I cut out an additional bad food, right? You don't go in and say like, I'm going to run a marathon next week. It's like, I'm going to run 1 mile next week. And then in a month from now, maybe I'll be up to 5 miles in a week. And then maybe 6 months from now, I can sign up for a marathon. All right. But in order to reach those big goals like saving the world, you first have to take care of your local stuff. Before getting the goal of like, I'm going to be like, super hot beach body on some fitness magazine, it's like, you got to take care of some of the small stuff first. All right. So persuasive communication, ask people to do small things when you are, trying to lead them to change their behavior. Because people get overwhelmed when you ask them to sort of make these massive shifts in their life. Classical conditioning, you probably learned about this in a psychology class, maybe from high school. All it is, it's getting people to associate new ideas with old ideas that they already think are favorable, that they already view as favorable. All right. So Coca-Cola did this. Coca-Cola was having some trouble with advertising, and Coca-Cola said, we are a new idea. So what is an old idea that everyone likes? Everybody likes Americana, and everybody likes Christmas. So here's one of their Christmas advertisements, right? Coca-Cola has nothing to do with Christmas. Christmas just existed, and Coca-Cola is like, we're going to put our bottle into a bunch of Christmas postcards. Americana, sort of like, old like Norman Rockwell kind of advertising like looks that Coca-Cola has also used. All right, so you take something that's already favorable and you pair it with your product. That's classical conditioning. Now, when I see a polar bear like this, or I see some sort of like, quasi cartoonish Christmas advertisement on TV, I'm gonna start thinking of Coca-Cola. All right. Sprite. All right. Back in the day, Sprite was having a hard time selling its product because it was new. It was a lemon lime soda, which 7 Up also existed. All right. And Sprite was like, we don't really know what to do. How do we sell this? Well, there was a sort of emerging thing called hip hop. Not It wasn't emerging in the 90s. It was obviously existed before the 90s, but it was getting more mainstream, we'll say, in the 90s. And Sprite said, look, here's this thing that everybody seems to like. There's this hip hop culture where kind of hip hop and sports are starting to kind of blend together a little bit, right? Sprite's like, let's just make all those individuals who are in the hip hop industry and these sort of like quasi connected hip hop athletes, let's connect them to Sprite. All right. Sprite has nothing to do with hip hop music. Sprite has nothing to do with sports. But Sprite said like that's what we're gonna be like the cool hip soft drink. All right. And at the end of the day, it's like it's just a soft drink. Like Sprite and 7 Up, they're like lemon lime soft drinks. However, they take this cool concept everyone's connected with, right? And then they put their new idea onto it. I think one of the newer Sprite spokesmen is LeBron James, and I think I saw an advertisement for it a year or so back. And the first thing I thought is like, LeBron James doesn't drink soda. Like that doesn't happen. I think he's 36, 37-year-old like NBA superstar. He has the cleanest diet in the world to stay in that kind of shape at his age for as many years as he's been in the league. So, but Sprite was like he's this like very cool hip athlete. And so you pair something that everybody likes, fantastic athlete, LeBron James, with your product, and now you have classical conditioning. Products have also done this, pairing stuff with like cowboys, manhood, family values, right? All these products, they're just products. They, everybody needs them. But you start pairing them with certain images, and someone thinks, ooh, if I smoke Marlboro cigarettes, I feel like a cowboy. There's this new, I think it's a whiskey called Tin Cup, but I think it's called Tin Cup, but it's an alcohol commercial, and it's just like people climbing mountains, in camping gear and stuff, and I'm like, you could drink anything while you're out camping, right? But they try to pair it with this sort of like outdoorsy, like very sort of rugged campaign, just to say like, ooh, if I drink this whiskey, I'm telling the world something about myself. It's like, look, like drink the whiskey that you think tastes delicious, all this sort of like lifestyle stuff that's around branding. They're just trying to sell lifestyles that have nothing to do with their actual product. Cognitive dissonance. This is the video that is down below. You need to watch it. But here's a quick summary. All right, cognitive dissonance. All it means is that I'm holding two competing ideas, and I need to reconcile them. So we all have ideas that are contradictory to each other. So this is the dissonance. Cognitive means it happens inside our head. So a classic example of this is regarded with people who are Catholic, and they are also pro-choice on the issue of abortion, right? Catholicism is very strictly pro-life, and so, but there are people who go to church or go to mass every Sunday, and they're like, I'm pro-choice on the issue of abortion. So the cognitive dissonance question is like, how do people reconcile these competing values that they have? And most of it gets to this idea of like people are telling themselves a story. So when we have competing beliefs, we have to tell ourselves a story as to why it's okay for me to have competing ideas, but it's not okay for other people to have competing values and beliefs. So for instance, you could say like, I believe everyone should tell the truth, but sometimes I exaggerate on my resume, right? Or sometimes I lie a little bit to my, significant other or my friends, right? We get really offended when people lie to us, and we're like, you have to be honest with me all the time. But we ourselves also tell little lies here and there, right? But here's the narrative. When I do it, I'm doing it for good reasons. Like I'm lying for good reasons, right? I'm doing it not to offend someone, or it's not that big of a deal, right? We explain it away. That's what cognitive dissonance looks at. All right, this handsome guy right here, Fessinger, all right, he writes this book in 57 called When Prophecy Fails. The entire story is down below. Again, watch the video. But what he did is he followed around this doomsday cult. He found out that people were quitting their jobs. They gave money. They left their family to go join this cult that said the world was going to end on December 24th, 1954. When it didn't, this is what he was interested in. He's like, I know the world's not going to end. So he's like, I'm interested to see what these people do because they made these huge changes to their lives, right? They gave up everything to go join Dorothy Martin and this doomsday cult. And he's like, I'm going to stick around for a couple of years and see what happens when they realize that the world didn't end. And what he found out is that people dug their heels in, right? A lot of people started to make justifications for the world not ending. They would say things like, well, maybe we got the time wrong, maybe we got the date wrong, maybe we weren't faithful enough to our God in order for like God to come and like bring about the apocalypse and take us off to, wherever new world we're going to, right? So they start making justifications because again, if I say the world's going to end and I give up everything and then the world doesn't end, it's not me just saying like, oh, I'm wrong, right? I was wrong about something. Now it's not just that, it's that I also have to look at my life and say, oh my gosh, how much time and energy have I wasted giving into something that's false? So instead of confronting the falseness that I've been buying into, I am more likely to justify my behavior and dig my heels in and say, no, I'm still correct. There's something that I'm missing. There's evidence I haven't looked at yet. We see this with people who have a crisis of faith later in life. If I spend my entire life in the Catholic Church and then one day when I'm 50, I wake up and I'm like, yeah, I don't think the Catholic Church is the right thing. Like, maybe it's like, maybe Buddhism is, or maybe it's like I'm an atheist now. A lot of people don't just like completely 180 say, I'm leaving the Catholic Church. They start to justify their behavior. They're like, well, I've already, because they've already devoted so much of their time. It's like every Sunday I spend in Mass. I've given 10% of my entire earnings over the course of my life to a church that I no longer believe is true, right? So you have this crisis where it's not just saying like, oh, I used to think God exists, now God doesn't exist, and I just, evidence, the end. It's, I have to look at my entire life and realize that I quit my job, I gave money, I left family, so many other, so then it's like, did I just waste my life on something that I don't believe in anymore? Same is true with academics. When academics sort of change their mind about theories, you're gonna find a lot of older academics, and this is true for like all the time. So it's gonna be me one day, right, when I'm an older academic. Newer academics come in with new evidence and say, I think your theory is wrong, and older academics are like, never. And the reason is because if I spent my entire academic career writing books and writing papers and getting published and giving talks and teaching thousands of students this idea, and then someone's like, Josh, I think your idea is wrong, that's a huge crisis with regard to like, how did I just spend my life? So instead of me just saying I'm wrong, I have this sort of narrative that I tell myself that says new evidence is in conflict with my entire lifestyle, and now I have to tell myself a story to justify why it is I behave the way I do, even though I know that these two beliefs are in conflict with one another. Watch the rest of the video. There's a better, more detailed explanation. All right, finally, how are we persuaded? All right, just sort of know these, right? So the first is we are persuaded through reciprocity. This is how politicians work a lot. Like Republican, Democrat, like we're gonna write a bill and they don't like each other's bill, but it's like, look, you give me a little bit of money for my project, I'll give you some money for your project. That's reciprocity. If you support me, I'll support you, even if I disagree with your position. All right. Consistency of commitment, right? If I keep giving to a certain charity, or I keep voting because I've always done it. So we all fall into these sort of habitual patterns. And if someone asks us to do something or to give more money, it's like, well, I'm already giving money, so I'll just kind of keep giving money. Or I've always supported that cause, so I'll keep supporting that cause. Social proof, right? What this means is that my friends or good people, celebrities, agree with me. So there is proof socially that the way I'm acting is good. All right. So I'm persuaded by other people think it's good, so I'm gonna act in that way that is also good. All right. Liking is sometimes referred to as like virtue signaling online, which is this little meme over here. Virtue signaling and selective outrage in media is so hot right now. All right. But what liking is like gain social capital. So we saw some of this. There's some interesting writing. I'm not gonna comment politically on it. But over this last summer with the BLM protest, you might have had a friend or saw a celebrity who posted a Black Lives Matter, like the black square on the Black Square Day for Instagram, or post or like retweeted some like Black Lives Matter story. And in the back of your head, you might have been like, well, that person's not really engaged that much, right? But a lot of people just sort of virtue signal online, or they just sort of like things. They're persuaded to do things because they feel like it's going to get them social capital. It's going to make it so that my Facebook friends stay my Facebook friends. It's gonna, if I go to a talk on campus and my professor sees me there, it's gonna sort of let my professor know that like I'm a good student, even if I don't really want to be there. So we are persuaded to do things if we think that it's going to add to our social capital. Authority, if you feel like you're going to get recognized by somebody in a position of power, you might do something, right? And then finally, scarcity. So we are persuaded to do things if we feel like this might be the last chance to do them, right? Time is short, carpe diem, right? Seize the day. So, hopefully when this pandemic is over, we all start to recognize the scarcity of things more often. And if you are sort of looking at a brochure and you're like, I should really take a trip to Denmark, right? It's just like book the ticket, because if another pandemic strikes, like you might be locked down a while, right? So when people sort of have that scarcity moment, obviously people do this later in life, right? They have a midlife crisis and they're like, crap, this is the last time, this might be the last opportunity I can drive that car or run that marathon or, buy a ticket somewhere. So people start to do that because they recognize the scarcity of time available. And so they're just going to be persuaded to do things because they want to have experiences in life. Okay, that's the section on Cicero and persuasion. Just sort of know those ideas. Watch the Cognitive Dissonance video down below if you're in my class, and I will see you all next time.